first private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, of which included more than 25 different experiments for the crew of 4 private astronauts conducting in the orbiting laboratory.
Station Houston on 2 for Tom and SSCs at your convenience.
Again, Expedition 67 crew members and Axiom Mission 1 crew members in Node 2. The Dragon is on the zenith port, or the space-facing side, so towards the ceiling is where the crew members will be ingressing and entering their Dragon. In the foreground there you see NASA astronaut Caleb Barron, part of the final farewell for the Axiom crew. Tom Marshburn floating off to the right there into the Columbus module. Marshburn will take the prime responsibility for monitoring the departure of Dragon. Just before we started our coverage, Marshburn was setting up his monitoring tools, making sure they were all good.
Hey, Tom. We still need to downlink some data from 2 of the Axiom crew members' SSCs. It's SSC 10 and SSC 19. From Roger's crew note earlier, we think that SSC 10 is an endurance. So just at your convenience, if you can get those 2 SSCs on the network, we'd appreciate it so we can get that data. One other thing for you, if you guys are willing, we'd be happy to have a camera on in Node 2. We'd appreciate the entertainment.
Okay, you can copy that, Laura. So you're looking for 10 and 19 to get those hooked back up to the network. We'll check to see if 10's in endurance. And the Node 2 camera will point in at the hatch. We've got half the crew that's headed in there and the other half going in, so we'll set that up.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
What you're hearing is some of the several steps to get the Axiom crew situated before that hatch is closed, making sure they have all of their items and all the check boxes have been verified, that the teams both inside the Dragon capsule as well as the teams on the ground can give a go for proceeding for undocking. We did hear prior to the start of our coverage at the 2.5-hour mark that the International Space Station flight control teams gave their go to proceed, the weather continuing to look good for the landing opportunities off the eastern coast of Florida. So they gave the go to proceed with the steps to go ahead and close the hatch.
Node 2 Cam 1 is up and on.
Copy. Thank you. We'll be coming on board.
Endeavor, this is LA from Seat 3. How do you hear?
And Endeavor, this is SpaceX on the Big Loop. We heard you probably about 2 by 5 on Space to Ground 2 there. How me?
This is LA responding on the Big Loop. How copy?
And LA, I've got you about 2 by 5 there on the big loop. How many? Okay, copy that. At this point in time, can I get a comm check from the pilot in seat 2 on the big loop?
He cannot. He had an earpiece fall out, so he's off trying to fix that.
Okay, copy that. Had an earpiece fall out, so he's fixing that. When he is ready, go ahead and give me a call on the big loop.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're following along with the procedures to get the crew ready to go ahead and close the hatch and get ready for an on-time docking tonight, 7:55 p.m. Central Time. Part of that is configuring what's called the Big Loop. This is an integrated communications loop between the NASA, SpaceX, and Axiom teams. So the space-to-ground loops that you hear on board the International Space Station are fully integrated with the communications on board SpaceX Dragon Endeavour. What you were just hearing was a communications check on board the spacecraft, on board Dragon Endeavour. They're working through the procedures to make sure that they are configured with the right communications loop, and the audio is coming in crystal clear. Again, the Axiom Mission 1 commander is Miguel López Alegría. We'll also be hearing from Axiom 1 or AX1 pilot Larry Connor. This is Mission Control Houston, now getting a shot inside the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour vehicle of the AX1 mission. You're seeing the commander of the mission, Miguel López Alegría, floating, getting the Dragon itself situated, preparing for the crew members of the AX1 mission. As commander, he'll be one of the last to get suited in the SpaceX launch and entry suits. Of course, you have seen in Node 2 already in their suits the mission specialist, Eytan Stibbe, and Mark Pathy, both in their suits. They'll be flanking the outside seats that you see from this view during the journey home. López Alegría will take the seat, the second from the right. Underneath the seats, you're seeing all the cargo that comes with the Axiom crew back for a splashdown off the coast of Florida. During the past couple of days, including earlier this morning, the crew finished up packing the last of that cargo, some of which includes about more than 200 pounds of science and hardware, some of which is NASA science, including some biological experiments. The Crew 3 astronauts no stranger to the SpaceX launch and entry suits, helping out the mission specialists get their suits situated, perfectly fit for the journey home. The crew 3 astronauts, including Rajachari, Tom Marshburn, and Caleb Barron of NASA, and Matthias Maurer of the European Space Agency, ESA, also took a Dragon capsule up to the International Space Station, SpaceX Dragon Endurance. That's at the far side, just behind them, towards the forward end of the International Space Station. You're now seeing a live view from Node 2 at the very forward end of the International Space Station, looking up at the zenith port of the International Space Station. This is the port where the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Mission 1 vehicle, is docked. In the foreground there is International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn.
Houston Station on 2 for SSC follow-up.
Go ahead, Raja.
I just wanted to clarify the SSC-19 you were talking about. Is that one already on the network, or were you saying you can't see that?
We cannot see it on the network.
Okay, copy. We think that's the airlock one, so Kayla's going to take a look at that, and 10 will be back up on the network shortly.
Copy, thanks.
Six Endeavour C2 on the big loop. How do you copy?
And Larry, I've got you 5x5 from C2 on the big loop. How me?
Mike, great to hear your voice. I hear you 5x5.
Okay, copy that. Standby 1. I just want to do one quick check here, but that will complete our first test for the audio checkouts on C2 and C3. So standby 1 for some further action.
Mike, if I could, one slight clarification. You're just slightly scratchy, but very audible.
Copy. Slightly scratchy, but still audible.
You're just joining us. You're getting a live view of the International Space Station. On the right, you see a lab view from the U.S. lab into Node 2, the forward end of the International Space Station. Docked to the zenith side, or the space-facing side, you can see them all looking up, almost towards the ceiling. That's on the view on the left. That's the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour is docked there. On the other side of the hatch is the Axiom Mission 1 crew. They're getting situated, preparing for closing the hatch and going through the sequence of getting ready for undocking tonight at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. You've heard some of the communications checks from on board the Dragon, from the pilot of the mission, of the AX-1 mission, Larry Connor, the mission specialist flanking both sides of the middle seats. So on the far sides of the Dragon include mission specialist Eytan Stibbe and mission specialist Mark Pathy. The AX-1 commander is Miguel López Alegría. And taking some photos in the hatch right now is the commander of the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn. His duties today include preparing the private astronauts for their undocking. He'll also be taking the prime responsibility of monitoring the procedure from the International Space Station. In the foreground there, grabbing his launch and entry suit, is mission specialist Mark Pathy. You can see by the Canadian flag representing Canada on this mission. Seated in the middle seats, more towards the foreground here, you can see the pilot of the mission, Larry Connor. And then to his right, in the commander position, is Miguel López Alegría.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, comm check.
SpaceX Endeavour have you loud and clear on the big loop.
And Larry, I have you 5x5 from seat 2. Can I also get a comm check from MLA in seat 3 on the big loop?
From the C3, how do you hear?
Okay, LA, I still probably have you about, I would say, 2x5, but this does complete the test that we want to do for audio troubleshooting. When able, you and Larry can swap back to your original seats.
So a minor correction, while we were getting that view inside the Dragon, on the middle left seat is the pilot position. However, Miguel López Alegría is currently seated in that position with pilot Larry Connor in the commander seat. They'll of course swap back for the flight home, but in the meantime, during these audio checks, they have swapped seats. Again, Commander Tom Marshburn, International Space Station Commander, in the hatchway between the International Space Station and Crew Dragon Endeavour, snapping some photos, watching the crew getting some of their items ready, and of course their suits on, getting through some of those procedures, preparing for an undock tonight. Again, that's 7:55 p.m. Central Time. He'll take the prime role of monitoring the undocking and exit through the what's called approach ellipsoid. That marks the end of joint operations. From there, NASA will of course be watching, but the prime responsibility and role of getting the private astronauts home falls to the SpaceX and Axiom Space teams. In the foreground there, you see to the right is mission specialist Mark Pathy. Climbing into the pilot seat is the pilot. That is Axiom Mission 1 pilot Larry Connor. Eytan Stibbe in the background there, also not in his launch and entry suit. He and Pathy will get situated in the suit prior to undock. The suit is required for the dynamic phases of the mission. That includes the undocking phase, when the Dragon itself physically separates from the International Space Station. The suits themselves provide an extra layer of protection. During the 16-hour transit, they will have the opportunity to remove the suits and air them out, get a little bit more comfortable, have a meal. It's about a 16-hour journey from undocking until they actually splash down off the coast of Florida. But of course, before that final sequence of preparing for the deorbit burn and the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere.
Endeavor, this is Houston on the Big Loop. We'll take voice checks from each of you at your convenience.
We just lost the view, but from the International Space Station cameras, you were seeing the Expedition 67 crew watching the private astronauts work their way to prepare for closing the hatch and, of course, undocking tonight. Weather has been not very cooperative for the private astronauts to return. It was originally scheduled for about an 8-day mission aboard the International Space Station. We ended up at about 15, primarily due to bad weather around the multiple landing sites identified around the coast of Florida. Because of that, the crew have been adjusting their sleep to support multiple undocking opportunities that we've seen throughout the past week. Today is an abbreviated day by the private astronauts and the Crew 3 astronauts, who are, of course, helping the private astronauts to work through their procedures before closing the hatch, making sure that they're ready to support the step-by-step instructions for a safe undocking from the International Space Station. Prior to undocking tonight, the crew will get an early night's sleep, they've shifted their sleep, so they're up a little later than they normally are, but they'll get an early rest, and Monday will be a catch-up day for them to get through some of the typical weekend cleaning activities.
We get to about 3 by 5, just coming in just a little quiet.
We've been having trouble with it. I have you right up there for what it's worth.
Yep, copy. We are expecting that.
So a quick rundown of the sequence that we'll see over the next couple of hours. Of course, we're still waiting for the hatch closure. We'll continue our coverage until we see the Dragon hatch close. That is, of course, one of several hatches that have to close to begin the undocking sequence. Another critical hatch is the what's called the A-pass hatch. It's the hatch closest to the Dragon hatch. Once that's closed, there will be a space in between the two hatches called the vestibule. And both of those are required to be closed to depressurize the space in between the International Space Station and the Dragon. That sets up for the Dragon to be able to undock. That sequence is set to, once the Dragon hatches are closed, that sequence will be about an hour long. Once the pressure in between the vestibule has to go from about the pressure inside the International Space Station, which is about the pressure of sea level on Earth, so a little over 14 pounds per square inch. So that has to go down to vacuum. In that time, it takes a pit stop at about 5 pounds per square inch, and they sit there for a little bit to do a leak check and make sure that the pressure itself is holding and there are no leaks before they actually proceed down to vacuum. Now they stay there for a little bit because there's a little bit of oscillation in the pressure to get a good reading before they can confidently say that there are no leaks, and then they proceed down to vacuum. If we stick to the timeline as we see it now, that sequence should be complete right about the time that we start our coverage for undocking. We're scheduled to start our undocking coverage tonight around 7:30 p.m., right before the scheduled undocking time at 7:55. Once we start our coverage, the teams will be preparing for a go, no-go poll. One final step, of course, they did say go at the 2.5-hour mark prior to undocking to proceed with the following steps. But it's one final check to make sure everything looks good, including weather, down at the landing sites before they go ahead and proceed with the undocking command. The undocking command now is scheduled to take place at about 7:50 p.m. It's about a 5-minute sequence once that command is initiated. It begins the retraction of the umbilicals that have been providing power and communications, data in between the Dragon and the International Space Station. That will retract. And right now, the Dragon is being held to the International Space Station by a hard mate of 12 hooks. They'll release them 6 at a time, and to release any stiction, they'll do a couple of what's called undocking undocking burns. They're very short pulses to actually physically separate the Dragon from the International Space Station. That undocking burn and the physical separation, again, scheduled 7:55 p.m. Central. When we start our coverage, we'll be joined by our colleagues at SpaceX and Axiom Space over in Hawthorne. You're now getting a view of the International Space Station flight control room. The teams here working together with the teams at Axiom Space and at SpaceX to oversee the operations that we're covering right now, the ingress of the private astronaut crew of Axiom Mission 1 and the hatch closure. The teams here support the International Space Station flight operations, monitoring the International Space Station vehicle as a whole, and of course the Expedition 67 crew aboard. For this shift, for the Orbit 3 shift, we're led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield. The voice you're hearing as the Capcom here in the room, that's communicating with the Expedition 67 crew, namely, but also with the private astronaut crew on occasion, is Capcom Laura Beachy. Now getting some of those views from space back, we have some pretty good coverage throughout our coverage of the hatch closure of Axiom Mission 1. So these gaps will be pretty intermittent and short, luckily, for our coverage, and of course we'll continue to provide live views until the hatch between the Dragon and the International Space Station is closed, the Dragon hatch.
Houston Endeavor, we're in step 3.4 and checking for debris. Correction, we're in 3.4. We're checking for desired LIO configuration.
Endeavor, this is SpaceX. We're with you in step 3.4. We're looking for Mark to swap into LIO cartridge 1. How copy?
Yeah, Mike, it's in work. We'll advise.
Okay, copy that, Larry. And just for your guys' awareness, we're still doing pretty good here on the timeline, about 5 minutes behind what we have scheduled, but no concerns.
That's 5 minutes behind in monitoring.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're getting live views from inside the cabin of SpaceX Dragon Endeavor. The Axiom Mission 1 crew situated, going through their procedures, getting ready for undocking later tonight. At the communications, in the pilot seat, you see AX-1 Commander Larry Connor talking with the SpaceX mission director about some of the procedures, including LIO canisters, that's lithium hydroxide, canisters that are responsible for scrubbing carbon dioxide in the Dragon cabin throughout the transit from the International Space Station to Earth, which is, of course, for this particular undocking, the transit time is a little more than 16 hours. In their seats, you see Larry Connor in the foreground. In the background, in the commander seat, AX-1 Commander Miguel López Alegría. To the right of the frame there is International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn, just helping out the private astronaut crew. Mission specialists getting situated in their launch and entry suits. You can see off in the back there. Marshburn helping out mission specialist Eytan Stibbe with the launch and entry suits. Off frame, but probably either behind or to the right, is the other mission specialist. You can see the empty seat in the very foreground there on the bottom left of your screen. That seat meant for mission specialist Mark Pathy. In the background, still donning or putting on his launch and entry suit, mission specialist Eytan Stibbe, being aided by International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn you see in the bottom right of your frame. You heard from the SpaceX mission director. We're slightly behind the timeline as we go through our procedures tonight, just about 5 minutes. Still trending towards being able to undock at the anticipated 7:55 p.m. Central Time tonight. But we'll continue to track as they work their way through these procedures, and again, we'll continue to cover live here until the hatch for Dragon is closed. After the hatch to Dragon is closed, there is a number of procedures that take place, and we'll be off air for the remainder of the hatch closing, including the APAS hatch and the hatch in between Node 2 and the pressurized mating adapter 3 that's on the space-facing port. That's the pressurized mating adapter that leads, it's the sort of tunnel that you were seeing earlier that leads to the Dragon hatch, and of course inside the Dragon vehicle that we're seeing here. Now again, at about the 2.5 hour mark prior to undocking, the space station mission control teams did a poll to make sure that we were still go from a space station perspective, and of course from a weather perspective, trajectory perspective, making sure everything was good for a docking tonight and a splashdown off the coast of Florida, scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. The splashdown time is a little bit after 1 p.m. Eastern Time, precisely 1:06 p.m. For an on-time splashdown of the AX-1 crew, the teams will quickly get together and continue to monitor the opportunities for the Crew 4 launch, which is at the heels of this mission. Of course, the International Docking Adapter ports on the International Space Station currently occupied by 2 Crew Dragons. We need to undock this one in order to make room for the Crew 4 Dragon Freedom.
Endeavor, LIO configured at 2315.
Copy that, Endeavor. LIO configured at 2315. At this time, you're go to proceed with the IMV teardown and hatch closure per 2.103.
In work.
Those LIO canisters, again, lithium hydroxide, that scrub carbon dioxide from the Dragon cabin on the 16-hour transit. Once the hatches are closed and once we're no longer relying on space station air, which you see, the ventilation ducts that supplied space station air to the Dragon are being removed. So now we'll be moving over to relying on the SpaceX Dragon Endeavor's environmental control and life support systems for the journey home, just making sure that everything's configured properly. Again, that journey home 16-hour splashdown tomorrow afternoon, shortly after 1 p.m. That sets us up for a launch of Crew 4 Dragon Freedom, which the destination is, of course, the International Space Station and the port that the Axiom crew is going to leave from. Now, the turnaround time, the scheduled launch time for Crew 4 is 3:52 and 55 seconds a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, the 27th. The transit time to the International Space Station is a little more than 17 hours, 22 minutes for same-day arrival of 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time on the 27th, 8:15 p.m. Central Time 1:15 a.m. on Thursday, the 28th GMT. Teams will continue to monitor the weather and other systems to ensure for that launch opportunity, and can of course readdress launch options should they need it. Another loss of signal. In the meantime, we'll show you the docking ports and where we're at right now. You can see lots of visiting vehicles on board the International Space Station. The Axiom Mission 1 Dragon, SpaceX Dragon Endeavour taking the Zenith port. You can see they were working what looked like the ceiling if you were inside the International Space Station. And then, of course, on the forward end is the SpaceX Crew 3 Dragon Endurance.
Any crew member, if you could just confirm for us that you can hear the Endeavour crew from station, we'd appreciate that.
Capcom Laura Beachy reaching out to the International Space Station crew, making sure the communications are solid. They are, of course, in the graphic here in the Dragon that's on the Zenith or space-facing side. Once that undocks, that's where the Crew 4 Dragon or SpaceX Dragon Freedom will dock if launched on time on early Wednesday morning. It will dock late Wednesday evening. Again, the handovers we're expecting here will be relatively brief. We're getting some pretty good video and audio communications all around for these procedures as we're witnessing the private astronaut crew ingressing, entering the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Mission 1 crew vehicle for the ride home. Undocking tonight, scheduled 7:55 p.m. Central Time. There is a window of opportunity of about an hour in case there's any flexibility needed, but as the SpaceX mission director reported, right now we're just a little bit behind the timeline, but could possibly make it up during the next procedures of closing various hatches and depressurizing the vestibule in between the two hatches, the Dragon hatch and the International Space Station hatch, getting ready for that undocking tonight. You're getting a live view from inside SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Space crew of private astronauts working through their procedures to get buckled up, situated, make sure the carbon dioxide canisters and communications are all set for their undocking. They're being aided in the hatchway there that you're seeing from this shot, this camera being positioned in node 2, pointing straight up or towards the space-facing side, the Zenith side.
Closing the hatch in 3.8.
SpaceX copies.
And there you have it, the International Space Station Commander, NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn, working on closing the hatch.
SpaceX Endeavour hatch is closed.
Copy that, Larry. We see the same. Ground is going to be commanding the flight computer state here shortly, at which point in time Eytan will be able to confirm his final step in location 1.
Copy that, Mike.
And you heard it confirmed from the AX-1 pilot, Larry Connor. The hatches to the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the private astronaut crew inside were closed at 6:26 p.m. Central Time. Now, a sequence of events will occur in between our coverage. We're going to wrap up here shortly, but in the meantime, what will happen is on the other side of the hatch, the International Space Station Commander Tom Marshburn, his job is not done. He's got a couple more hatches that he has to close, including the A-Pass hatch. Of course, he's taking some photography, making sure there's no FOD or foreign object debris, making sure that the hatch has an airtight seal before he continues methodically, step by step, to close the hatches and begin the depressurization sequence. Once those hatches are closed, it's going to create an area in between the two hatches called the vestibule, which will be at the space station pressure above 14 pounds per square inch. We got to get that down to zero, near vacuum. It's a very methodical process that takes about an hour, so we'll continue to monitor that while we're off air. And then, of course, we'll go through the sequence of undocking. Once the undocking command is sent, it'll be about 5 minutes of hatches unlatching and umbilicals retracting, and of course a couple of thrusts to actually physically push the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour away from the International Space Station. We're still tracking towards an undocking on time for now at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. Stay tuned for our coverage. We'll be joined by SpaceX and Axiom Space for our undocking coverage, where you can get the latest undocking times, and we'll be covering the operations as they undock and exit the approach ellipsoid. This is about a 1 kilometer sphere, a little bit more than that, around the International Space Station. It's really a marker for the end of joint operations. Once they're outside of the vicinity of the International Space Station, the flight of the AX-1 private astronauts and the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour to a splashdown off the coast of Florida is truly in the hands of SpaceX and Axiom Space. But in the meantime, that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston and NASA TV for our coverage. Again, we'll be staying tuned and for all of the procedures. Right now, our coverage for undocking is scheduled to start at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, this is Mission Control Houston. to see the made those packages ahead of launching to the International Space Station, and since have gone through more than 25 of their experiments. They conducted a number of outreach activities, reaching out to kids and organizations around the globe, and they're now just getting ready to get home. While we were running those packages, we did hear that the leak check itself looked very good. So the vestibule in between the two hatches is down to vacuum. It was a good leak check. So now we'll just move on to the next sequence of steps. The main one is the go, no go poll. If everything looks good weather-wise, which it is continuing to trend in a positive direction, the leak check was good. They're still working through making sure the communications are good. They'll do a poll just to make sure that they are ready to undock, and then they'll go ahead and initiate the command to start that sequence. That sequence is set to start here in about 10 minutes, and then that will start a 5-minute sequence until the Dragon itself physically separates from the International Space Station. Right now, the Dragon is connected by umbilical. We have the umbilicals are providing power and data to the SpaceX Dragon, and it is secured to the station by 12 hooks. What we'll see is the umbilical itself retract, then relying on the Dragon vehicle for the environmental control and life support systems, for the battery and power, and then of course for the communications, and then the hooks will start to retract. There's 12 hooks. They'll retract 6 at a time. And then they'll conduct a couple of pulse burns. They're called undocking burns, just really short firings of the Dragon's Draco thrusters to physically separate the Dragon from the International Space Station. Then we'll go into a couple of departure burns, namely departure burn 0 and 1, each just lasting a couple of seconds, and that will take the Dragon outside of the keep-out sphere and then behind the International Space Station to get eventually below, and then start a couple of phasing burns to get in the right orientation, ready for that landing off the coast of Florida. Again, we're 20 minutes behind, so we're looking at that undocking sequence to start at 8:10 p.m. Central Time, with the physical separation targeted for 8:15 p.m. Central Time. And then they'll be able to catch up through some of the phasing to stick with that landing time that we advertised a little bit after 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Mission Control Houston. We are hearing that there may be some availability to move that undocking time up. Teams are evaluating now to see if we can move the undocking time up 5 minutes. We'll stand by.
SpaceX Endeavour. We are go for undock and visors are down, restraints and feet secured.
SpaceX copies all.
And there you have it. You're getting a live look at the SpaceX flight control team in Hawthorne. The words you just heard relayed up to the crew confirm what was being discussed here on the ground. The teams are looking to move the undocking time up 5 minutes. So that sequence that I advertised before is set to start here in about 3 minutes, 5 minutes after the hour, 8:05 p.m. Central Time, 6:05 p.m. Pacific. It's a 5-minute sequence with the umbilical retraction and the hook retraction until there is physical separation with the International Space Station. That new time for undocking, the physical separation at 10 p.m. Central Time.
To have a camera view.
And standby 1, that should be as soon as we command the undocking sequence.
Okay, as soon as we command undocking, standing by.
We're now 1 minute away for the teams to execute the undocking sequence. Again, it's a 5-minute sequence. We're looking at an undock tonight at 8:10 p.m. Central Time, 6:10 p.m. Pacific. The crew's visors are down. This is an automatic sequence once they initiate the command to begin the sequence. The undocking time that we'll report will be the physical separation of SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the AX-1 crew from the International Space Station.
Undock sequence commanded.
You just heard confirmation of the initiation. The undocking sequence has begun. The umbilicals are retracting.
Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
Umbilical has been retracted. The first set of hooks, that's 6 of the 12, are beginning to retract. Again, the umbilical has fully retracted, and the first 6 hooks of 12 are also retracting. Each of the hooks takes a little bit more than 2 minutes to fully retract. You see teams at the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston, Texas, as well as the SpaceX Flight Control Room in Hawthorne, California, eagerly watching the undocking sequence.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
The first set of hooks you heard, the 6 of them have retracted nominally. The other 6 are now driving in work. We're looking for an undocking 8:10 p.m. Central Time. We're on track to meet that. And we're about halfway through driving those second set of hooks. Once those are completely driven, the sequence to initiate those burns to physically separate the Dragon from the International Space Station will happen relatively quickly. So we'll stand by to witness that physical separation and the official undocking of the first private astronaut crew from the International Space Station.
All hooks open and nominal.
And right on time, physical separation confirmed. 8:10 p.m. Central Time, 6:10 p.m. Pacific.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Burns are nominal so far. SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the first private astronaut crew, AX-1, separating from the International Space Station, concluding their 15 days aboard the orbiting lavatory.
Depart 0 burn complete and nominal.
Nominal burns for the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour. That's good undock burns in the first departure burn. Depart burn 0 looking good. Depart burn 1 coming up in about 5 minutes. That undocking time was 8:10 p.m. Central Time, 6:10 p.m. Pacific. The International Space Station was 262 statute miles over the South Atlantic Ocean, west off the coast of Africa. Flight controllers are tracking a good departure of SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the AX-1 crew inside. Everything's looking good. They're 45 meters away from the International Space Station, slowly separating. We're coming up on 4 minutes past the undocking time of the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the AX-1 crew. Undocking just 4 minutes ago. We're expecting that next depart burn coming up in a little bit more than a minute and a half. That'll be depart burn 1 that will send the crew out of the keep out sphere, which is a 200-meter zone around the International Space Station with its own set of flight rules. It'll continue to coast outside of the keep out sphere after that depart burn 1 to the approach ellipsoid. The approach ellipsoid about a kilometer away. Once it exits the approach ellipsoid, that ends the joint operations of the International Space Station teams that you see here in Mission Control Houston. It'll be SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne and the Axiom Space teams that'll have the responsibility of taking the crew from the approach ellipsoid down to a safe landing off the coast of Florida. And we're just a few seconds away from the next departure burn. Trajectory is looking good, about a little less than 10 seconds. There you see it. We got confirmation that depart burn 1 has started. You're seeing those Draco engines firing. This is about a 20-second firing.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart 1 burn is complete and nominal. At this time, you do have a go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. As a reminder, ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
SpaceX Endeavour, copy all, proceeding to 4.012.
Good readback.
And you heard her, that's a good depart burn 1. This burn is the last that will take them out of the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid, which you heard mentioned on the communications to the crew. In the meantime, it means that a lot of the flight rules for having those suits on during this particularly dynamic phase of flight with the undocking burns separating from the International Space Station, that has concluded, so they're good to take off their suits. It's a 16-hour ride home, so they'll want to be comfortable, get out of those suits and stretch. In the meantime, they'll continue to monitor, of course. We're getting some views, though intermittent, from the inside the Dragon cabin, and they'll be able to move about the cabin, have a meal, and even rest.
Could never understand cameras external.
We just got confirmation the Dragon.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere.
Station copies.
So you heard it called up to the crew. The 4-member private astronaut crew have exited the keep-out sphere. It'll be about another 13 minutes or so until they exit the approach ellipsoid and officially end joint operations. Now, we'll end our coverage after the approach ellipsoid exit, but the crew's journey, of course, has only just begun. You heard that there will be doffing off their suits or taking them off. That gets them nice and comfortable for the 16-hour commute that they have from the International Space Station down to a splashdown off the coast of Florida. They undocked just west off the coast of Africa. They'll do a couple of orbits of the Earth and then, of course, splashdown off the eastern coast. Their primary splashdown target for this opportunity is Jacksonville, Florida, but they have a couple of backup opportunities identified as well. The teams will be constantly monitoring weather, making sure that it's okay. As you know, weather has been uncooperative for the past couple of days to get our crew members home, but looking at the weather for tomorrow afternoon, Monday the 25th, things are looking good, trending in the right direction, but teams, of course, will continue to monitor. The Axiom crew is just a little less than 400 meters from the International Space Station. They're cruising right now. That was the last departure burn that we saw, departure burn 1. They're really in a coast phase now to get them out of the approach ellipsoid, and then they'll go through a series of additional departure burns and phasing burns to get them in the right orientation for a splashdown off the coast of Florida. Andy and Trisha, I don't know if you guys were watching, but it was absolutely incredible to see the Axiom crew undock from the International Space Station, especially during a nighttime. You really got to see those Draco engines light up. It was truly astounding from this end. Let's toss it over to Hawthorne, Trisha, and Andy. I wonder what your perspective was now seeing that the Axiom crew has undocked from the International Space Station, concluding their stay at the orbiting laboratory.
Thanks, Gary. Yes, it certainly was very exciting to watch the Dragon undock from the space station. Things are looking great right now. The crew is on their way to exiting the approach ellipsoid. And so after, about 15 days aboard the International Space Station, the first all-private astronaut crew is wrapping their mission that began just over 16 days ago now. It's been a mission full of scientific and outreach objectives with the overall goal of expanding space access to a wider global audience. The historic mission began on April 8th with the launch of our AX-1 crew in the Crew Dragon Endeavour from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Pad 39A. Endeavour then made its approach to the ISS, culminating in a successful dock to the Zenith port. The crew, those are some really great shots of the Crew Dragon on Launch Pad 39A. It was a beautiful day and a gorgeous view there of the Dragon approaching the ISS. The crew, after they docked, was then welcomed by the Expedition 67 crew in the official welcome ceremony. And from there, they jumped right into their busy schedule and maximized every bit of their time for scientific and outreach objectives. Some of it involved getting used to this entirely new environment. The crew had, over 700 hours of training to prepare for their life on orbit, but when it becomes a reality, it certainly takes some time getting used to it. For example, the fluids behave in a much different way. You have to figure out how to move your body around in a zero-gravity environment. So, there is a period of time to get used to it. The crew's time on station also included observations conducted from the cupola, which has a beautiful view of the Earth. There you can see a gorgeous view of the horizon and some gorgeous views of the auroras right above it. The crew was also able to film some of their day-to-day aspects of on-orbit life. You can see a food storage bag there with all different kinds of meals available for them to eat. I like the peanut butter can right there. These day-to-day aspects are exactly part of what they were able to show in the numerous outreach events that they held on orbit. Larry, Eytan, and Mark held several outreach events with students from many different schools and museums. MLA called an international committee conference to order, and Eytan spoke with the Israeli president while on orbit, highlighting Israel's return to spaceflight after Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli astronaut to fly, and marking Eytan as the first Israeli astronaut to be on the ISS. These kinds of events are critical to raising awareness and excitement for the future of spaceflight in future generations. Also, it's just, really cool to be able to talk to an astronaut real time while they're 250 miles above you in space. Now, additionally, one of the primary objectives of this mission was research and technology demonstrations. For example, the first ever successful demonstration of two-way holoportation shown by Mark there, which will enhance telemedicine efforts and help facilitate deep space missions. Additionally, optical lens experiments conducted by Eytan that you see on the screen there, the precision in manufacturing that they can achieve in zero gravity significantly bolsters deep space astronomy research efforts. Eytan also led a neuro wellness technology demonstration to monitor brain activity. And they also had the Astro skin vest demonstrations worn by Mark, which will directly inform new detection techniques for problems with heart, lung, and circulation systems. The mission wasn't only about science and outreach, though. The arts played a big role as well. MLA and prodigy pianist Blackbach made music in space history when they performed a keyboard and piano duet of an original composition. Eytan also displays here a beautiful ring specifically designed for microgravity. And those were just some of the highlights of the trip, and there was so much more accomplished than what was able to be shown in that video. We'd probably be here for the next 15 days if we went through in detail. But for those of you who are interested, please check out the URL axiomspace.com/ax1-research for an inside look into exactly what they were able to accomplish while on orbit.
Yeah, that was some really cool clips. I really liked MLA eating, or I guess drinking or eating the ball of orange juice,
Yeah.
and that space ring looked super cool. For now, Dragon is continuing to exit and distance itself from the International Space Station. We're going to check back in with Gary at in Houston, Texas for updates. Gary?
Hey, thanks, Andy and Tricia. Really great to see a lot of the activities that they performed on board the International Space Station. It was truly a sprint. When we talk about long-duration stays aboard the International Space Station, it's really a marathon. 6 months is a very long time, and they got a lot of experiments to do. But it's not to shy away from the amount of activities that were accomplished on board the AX-1 mission. Lots of science, lots of outreach activities. They truly did a lot. And, of course, that journey is now coming to an end. So far, the trajectory looks very good for the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the AX-1 crew separating from the International Space Station. Exit of the approach ellipsoid is just minutes away. They safely exited the keep out sphere, and we did hear confirmation that 2 of the 4 astronauts are already out of their suits, and they're going to start drying them to make sure that they're nice and comfortable for when they re-don them for the next dynamic phase of this flight, which is of course the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere and splashing down off the coast of Florida. In the meantime, we'll follow from here in Mission Control Houston to make sure that they safely exit the approach ellipsoid, and we'll stand by for confirmation of that. And then, of course, from then we'll wrap up our coverage, but we'll be monitoring every step of the way with really the prime responsibility over with SpaceX and with Axiom Space. This is a live look from the flight control teams over in Hawthorne. They'll be monitoring the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the AX-1 crew through the 16-hour journey until they're safely returned to Earth. We just got confirmation the approach ellipsoid exit is expected in about a minute. From there, the teams you're seeing on the screen will take full control over the SpaceX vehicle and the crew inside. Right now, still in joint operations with the International Space Station flight control teams here in Houston, just making sure they exit from the vicinity of the International Space Station. That approach ellipsoid, it's more like 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers is the exact specifications of that true ellipsoid. So we'll stand by for confirmation once they've exited that space. And with that, we have confirmation. The AX-1 crew has officially exited the approach
Dragon
ellipsoid.
SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on a safe free drift trajectory. Houston will be taking down the big loop shortly. Expect ISS audio traffic to cease. We hope you enjoyed your time with your hosts on Crew 3, and we're looking forward to getting you home. At this time, we also request swapping any audio destinations back to Dragon to ground when able.
Copy all, Mike. Break. Laura you and the team there in Houston, thanks once again for all the support through this amazing adventure that we've had, even longer and more exciting than we thought. We really appreciate your professionalism, and with that, we'll sign off.
All right, you heard it, folks. The AX-1 crew has exited the approach ellipsoid. They are officially outside of the jurisdiction of the International Space Station. It's truly up to the teams at SpaceX and Axiom Space to get these guys home. You heard those congratulatory words from the commander of the mission, Miguel López Alegría, commending the work of the NASA teams and, of course, the teams at SpaceX and Axiom for their wonderful stay, an extended stay at that, 15 days aboard the orbiting laboratory. They got a lot to experience and, of course, a lot to share when they get to the ground. They're on a 24-hour safe trajectory right now, which means that if anything were to go wrong, they would be in a good course not to intersect or any conjunctions that are in the way. So everything's looking good on that end. So with that, from here in Mission Control Houston, we will conclude our coverage of this mission and truly hand it over to the teams at SpaceX and Axiom Space. It's been a wonderful ride. I've been very close personally to this mission, working very hard to make sure that they've been able to execute all of their activities on board, and it's been a true honor to be a part of this mission and through all of the 15 days. A lot has happened, and it's really the beginning of something greater. This is the first mission of its kind, and NASA's goal is to see more missions like this. Private astronaut missions will be the customer demand in the future for NASA to be eventually one of many customers working side by side with private astronauts on commercial destinations. Folks, this is just the beginning of that era, and it was truly an honor to be a part of it. With that, that'll wrap up our coverage from here in Mission Control Houston. And to Trisha and Andy, I'll toss it over to you guys in Hawthorne to bring us home. Thanks for having us be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Well put. Thanks for walking us through the joint operations portions of the mission. Now that Michael, Larry, Mark, and Eytan have departed the International Space Station, it's going to take them about 16 hours until they make their way back to Earth. Next up, the crew will continue to doff their spacesuits and get a little bit more comfy for flight. In about an hour, they will get ready for a rest period that will last for about 10 hours, 8 hours for actual sleeping, and a couple hours for pre- and post-sleep activities. As they rest, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return to Earth for Dragon and the AX-1 crew.
And should the current projections hold, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, Monday, April 25th, Axiom and SpaceX will pick back up with live coverage of the conclusion of this AX-1 mission. Should teams need to adjust the timing of splashdown, it is our plan to go live about an hour before splashdown occurs. For the latest on the timing of this final stage of the AX-1 journey, be sure to visit axiomspace.com, and you can track Dragon's flight on spacex.com/launches. From all of us at Axiom Space, thank you to NASA for the incredible efforts made on this mission towards the shared goal of opening low Earth orbit for commercial endeavors, and thank you for tuning in. We look forward to sharing the culmination of this mission with you soon.